Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly. It is to USA Prepares. And Patrick is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at GCN. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. DocRam.com. Also, RichardAllenMiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. Hey, welcome, Rick.
Good morning, Vincent. Good morning. Yeah. We are at the end of days or something because everything is creepy out there. Everything. I mean, here we are with our connection.
All right. Yep.
Yeah. And the way people are driving and behaving toward each other just in the streets, I'm ready to go fight someone, and I don't want to fight anybody. I'm a sweet old man. Why would I want to be so angry all the time?
I would say you're a sweet man. I wouldn't say you're a sweet old man.
Well,
all right, Rick. Let me put an exclamation point.
I blow my nose with my finger, so I've got some habits. I learned that one from the Amish.
Before we get into
they were very.
Before we get into today's science,
they're very clean in their behaviors and rigid and martial, and yet they won't carry a handkerchief in their back pocket because it gets all cruddy. So what they do is they just blow their nose with their finger, and then it's out of their body, and they don't have to carry it. German, I love it.
So you don't want to stand in front. You don't want to stand in front of them. You just make sure you're behind them when they do that.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so, hey, Rick, before we get into today's...
Yeah, I know, I got to be all of it. It's real bad when it really doesn't come out right. That's the bad part. And then you've got something out of Gomer Pyle with Gomer and his rest
Rick, we're going to lose our... We don't have very many people in class today, and we're going to lose them.
Yeah, there it is.
So, Rick...
Yeah.
All right. Let me put an exclamation point on what you just said, okay?
Sure.
And then we'll get into today's science. And then we'll get into science. All right. So you're talking about things going wrong. Well, I had this problem with my tooth, and one of our dentist is one of our senior instructors. He's in Springfield. So I went to see him, and he said, "Oh, there's no problem." Oh, geez. X-ray wouldn't have shown this, but yeah, what root canal? What root canal? So I'm thinking, gosh, how does that happen? Well. So, hot really affects it, cold really affects it, warm affects it. I'm in a lot of pain. So he patched me up and, did some drilling and took it down, to almost the nerve and put a temporary, cap or crown on it. And that was all really good. And I really appreciate what he did. And he said, but because it's a molar and because it's way back there, we don't do that. But I've got a couple specialists, and let me give you a name of a specialist. And, so he forwarded my x-rays, and, within about a week I had an appointment, which was great. That appointment was Monday morning at 9:50. Well, heck, that's right when we're broadcasting. So I took the day off, and we did a rebroadcast. So, class, that's why I wasn't here on Monday, right? So we're all ready to go. The rerun of USA Prepares is all cut up, ready to play. And we get a call from the dentist's office, and Dr. TC's, been at the hospital all night. His wife's having a baby, and we don't know the status, but he's not going to be in today. Okay. Well,
you got saved by the bell.
Well, we don't know. Well, yeah. Okay. So when's he coming in? Well, we don't know. All right. So 2 days goes by. Yesterday, his gal called up and said, "Okay, got you all rescheduled." And I said, "So when's that?" And she said, "December 11th." I said, December 11th. That's over a month away. I said, this is a root canal. You know that, right? Yeah, we know that. So, okay. So that's the soonest appointment? Yeah, that's as soon as we can get you in here. And I said, now, you understand that when you called me, I had an appointment for Monday, and you canceled that appointment, and you're telling me that the soonest you can get me in is over a month away. And she said, yes. And I said, well, let me ask you this. When do you guys close for the day? She said, 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. So I said, okay, so let me see if I got this right. So he misses a day of work. And he has appointments until 2 o'clock. So if he worked 1 extra hour each day of the week, he would have this backlog all cleared up. That's the way I see it. And she said, well, let me see what I can do. And by now I realized I have frosted her. I've absolutely driven a wedge. I burned that bridge just by what I just said. And so before she called me back, I called her right back. And I said, let's forget the whole thing. And she said, the whole thing? And I said, yeah, let's forget the whole thing. I'll go see any dentist instead. Any dentist. And I think that was the nail that finally was driven into the coffin, or the bridge that I broke, when I said, I'll go to anybody before I'll go to your boss. And I was frosted. I was frosted that this guy, I mean, I appreciate the fact that he had a new baby, but he also has patience. He's in the medical business. He's a dentist. So when you talk about society coming apart, this is just one more example of failure to meet obligations.
The orientation.
No, I'm not saying.
Yeah, the orientation of medicine today is about making money, not trying to make someone better. And that's why
and I would be delighted.
Because once they're on a prescription, they have to come into the office every so often to get it renewed. That means they have that set up as an automatic same old. The second thing that they're teaching in medical school today is that rather than spending 1 hour with each customer or client like they used to do, they book 6 people at 10 o'clock in the morning. All 6 people show up at 10 o'clock, and I get to go in at 10:40 and have 10 minutes with my doctor walking in with his little computer, sitting down and saying, how are we doing today? Now, when he did that for the first 6 months, every 6 months, I started to get the idea that the whole thing was a making money thing where he's making 6 times the money he used to make by seeing 6 people instead of 1 person. And it runs over because some people require 15 minutes rather than 10, and or he needs to take a break to have his latte. Now, I've had it with medicine and dentistry because, for example, root canals, what they're doing is opening up an old place where a root used to be that's dead, and now they're opening it up so you have a house or housing for bacteria. Now, why would they do that?
So what do you do?
Well, that's a good question. And we're kind of the same way in all services. It's a metaphor. And from a science point of view, and I'm stepping backward now, the whole thing is, if they discuss money, it's because it's about money. They want to talk about your bill, and here's your pay-as-you-go kind of thing. It's a revolving door. I remember...
And the money part...
I'm sorry?
The money part comes first. Okay, can I have your name, date of birth,
and comes first. Whereas my dad's surgeon, the guy that worked on my dad's heart, was so drawn to my father, he came over for dinner and used to come over on a regular basis as a part of our family. Now, that's my father. Now, today, my dentist, my doctor, whom I've known, since he came out of medical school, I chose him purposely because he was a Seventh-day Adventist. That meant he would be slow on drawing prescriptions. Now, I had a problem with my trigeminal nerve in my mouth, and who's to figure it out that I went to a chiropractor when my doctor was going to send me to the Reinhardt Institute for ketamine injections. I just said no, just like you did. Doesn't matter what happens to my face and the pain I'm in. I'm not doing that. That's it. And usually when you say something like, I'd rather die, that's usually what happens. So I decided to do something different. I went out to a chiropractor, and that chiropractor, because I asked a question, I said, why are all my injuries on my left side? And that stumped my chiropractor to a point where he decided to do an x-ray. And what he did was even the Navy, when I became a Navy SEAL, had never discovered that I had broken my neck when I was 5 years old. Nobody knew it. I had no memory of it. Why? It had been suppressed. What happened? My father, my real father, was attacking my mother, and at 5 years old I went in to defend her, and he nearly killed me. And broke my neck at a place that normal x-rays would not have discovered, and this man had done a full-body scan of me, discovered that there was a scar tissue. I went to my sister. Oh, yeah, my sister knew all about it. I didn't, of course, but yeah, and she told me what happened, and all I had to do was rethink the way I sit as a habit in my chair, and the pain in my mouth went away. Yet, my doctor was insisting I go get ketamine injections at Reinhardt, which would have cored me and made me a bumbling old man with no mind. And
We'll be right back. Hold that thought. We'll be right back.
Okay.
And we're talking about...
let me pick it up. Apart. Got it all. You don't even need a cue. So what happened was, here I am with Medicare refusing to pay for my chiropractor and the expenses I went for those x-rays to discover that I do not need a prescription, which Medicare was quite willing to fill and pay. And HealthNet, my alternative subsequent provider, provider, is advocating we will absolutely cover this. This saved us and you a great deal of money and pain, suffering, and continued problems. And Medicare won't budge. And my doctor, his office, is dragging their feet to the point where I'm about ready to give up trying to get collection from Medicare. Now, you tell me what I should be doing next, because we're talking not more than $1,000, but that $1,000 could be a lot of things for me. You know, that's a lot of money for me. And I am at war with Medicare. My doctor, I went 37 years, and I'm about to fire him. Now, if I fire him, how am I going to get a local provider that will work with me? This area where I live is so rural in many ways. The doctors, like your dentist, can take off time. They work 4 days a week. Oh, he's opening a second and third clinic. How can he do that? And the money. Oh, well, it's because it's not about health anymore. And the man has less than 1/10 my education. I know more about what's going on with my body than he does, but I need him to get my Medicare. And he's dragging his feet to force me to have to do prescriptions. And this is a Seventh-day Adventist. Now, I am at my wit's end, and I'm not sure what to do except get my automatic weapon and go postal. How's that sound? To make a point. I won't. But that's what I can see now why people do this. They get to such a place of frustration with the system being absolutely wrong. No way to fix it. Nobody wants it fixed. And the whole thing is about putting me as an old man in a tiny box and put away because I'm just troublesome. Now,
well,
I want to talk about something else, and this is very important to me. You were exposed to your mother's illness several years ago, and you were there at her bedside every moment. And one of the reasons I left medicine was because when you're around sick people, you get sick. Why? Well, it's a mentat of, belief systems and things like that, but there's something else that nobody's ever discussed, and I see it with very close friends like Grace Thorne and others. Grace lives in a haunted house, and it's changing her. It's being with your mother changed you. Why? After your mother got better, you, for the next 2 years, right up to now, have been ill, off and on. Why? There are, as a metaphor, there are maggots at every plane in existence, the astral plane, the intellectual plane, the archetypal plane. There are maggots to break down entity. And entity is anything. Their purpose is to break things down into more basics. And the astral plane is the same way as the physical plane. And when you are around people that are ill, they're ill on several levels, and what happens next is a thing called Klingons, where you have to wash and sterilize your hands. It's a metaphor again. And most of us don't think about it because we're so strong that we go into a hospital to visit a friend, and when we leave, we have forgotten about how staph, for example, as a metaphor, is rampant everywhere in a hospital, and if you're not careful, you get staph infections. Period. End of story. Well, the same thing is true on the astral and other planes of existence. And that's what distinguishes the difference between...
Dr. Richard Allen Miller's
Sorry about
with us.
that too, by Vinny.
Yeah. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Website, richardallenmiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. Rick, you were talking about Klingons. Please continue.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry I got so overexcited about talking about these things because we are now moving into the realm of the unknown. And it's a place that comes with advancement of knowledge and awareness and evolution in our consciousness. And what we're trying to do is understand why things happen and be able to predict them. The reason I didn't like being in a hospital, working in a hospital, because most of the people there are ill, which means the likelihood of exposure is kind of like being around a child. You can count on it. That's why they're breeding grounds for, mumps and measles and, whooping cough and whatever. And to older people, me, you, whatever, we're around small children, it can kill us. Because not only do we have to fight the illness, and our body slows down in its response coefficient to that of a child, but we're exposed to other kinds of cooties that we cannot see, have not defined, and are yet there doing their deed. And that's where a ghost, which is a soul trying to go back home, gets trapped into matter and then breaks down and becomes a poltergeist. Now, it's a lesser entity, decaying, rotting, on an astral level that creates their back. And with that said, once you start to realize that, there are rituals, there are protocols, there are things you do besides washing your hands with soap and water. The first thing that Matt Stein will say when we have a grid down situation, what's the very first thing that you should be doing? You cut your fingernails down to the quick so you're not putting a bunch of germs up near your mouth right out of the gate. You're concerned about being able to stay well in a situation where things are not sterile. And if you're visiting your mother and she's not well, and she's not on a deathbed, but she's like gravely ill type of thing, gravely ill, that suggests illness is occurring on several levels. And what most of us are doing today is working from a place of wounds rather than a place of purpose. And the distinction between the two is very fine, because intent is what actually happens at the end of the day, whereas purpose flows where you become inflamed. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and everybody gets it. Hey, get out of his way. Let him go. He's doing it. It's good. That kind of thing. Now, that's what Crowley meant, and none shall say nay. Now, what happens is that when you spent time with your mom, didn't you notice that then for the next 2 years after she's well and moving on, that you still kept getting recurring situations, trying to blame it on Rio? And in fact, I'm going to suggest some of it came from the caregiving you gave your mother. It's as if you gave her some of your help in exchange to take on some of her illness, which you're now doing. It's a metaphor. It doesn't mean it's a right way of looking at things. It's a way of looking at things. And once you've done that caregiving, you must take care of yourself, or you will get ill and pass those cooties on to the next person and the next person and the next person. And that is what's happening on our earth right now. It's a type of invasion. It's terraforming us where all the fish in the sea have cesium-134 in them now. That's something I just posted. It's, where is that from? Fukushima. It's almost as if we're being terraformed by something that wants this earth to be different than the types of life forms it currently supports. And
I'm glad you mentioned that, Rick, because if you look at the animals, if you look at, the mice and the birds and the snails and the worms and, and larger animals, dogs and cats and deer and so forth, they're not destroying the planet. They are really not destroying the planet. They're just getting by and they're eating and they're going on with their lives. We, on the other hand, are polluting the planet with toxins that we don't know how to manage.
Here's another metaphor for you then. If you think you're doing it, how much methane are you creating compared to the ants on your property? Now, nice try, Vincent, but there's other things going on here. And methane aside, as a metaphor, there's something else going on that is going to require the likes of people like me changing the nature and definition of what physics is into the next level of approaching the sciences on how to defend yourself. The bad news is physics isn't any more real than religion. It's actually a closed system and has nothing to do with facts and reproducibility. Reproducibility is your upper brain making all your beliefs true, and I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't believed it. And most of our experiments in physics are biased. That's why they call it observer bias. And I have to tell you, I know of no law, the theory of everything, TOE. Yeah, good luck with that, because I don't think it works like that. It has to do with the training of your mind. And the mind is what is creating all of this, including Ragnarok. And do you believe in it? How could it not happen? Okay? Now, there's nothing wrong with change. Change, for me, is an opportunity. Because I know things are going to change. That means I have an opportunity. to make them more like what I want them to be. What is that about? Well, it depends on how you're in dialogue with yourself, because you are no longer human. Basically, you are whom you feed. You are a habitat with a bunch of different things going on, viruses, molds, yeast, and whatever. And while you might be sick, what's that mean? And what does homeostasis mean? Because many of us have different balances, and what's illness for one person is health for another. And we're all different and unique. And the way medicine and dentistry and now education is trying to put us into all in the same thing, what happened to the concept of diversity and the idea of uniqueness? And so I'm approaching this thing from a different way of science that has, it's new. It's, I had the rare privilege of talking to one of my old employers, Jerry Pollack, yesterday, a couple days ago. And Jerry's changed a little bit because Jerry was like me, extremely open-minded until, and that's what anesthesiology is about, where he is. He's professor emeritus, and yet the School of Medicine would presume to break down his laboratories so he can no longer continue his research on structured water. Why is that? Politics. Now, politics aside, anesthesiology is, in my opinion, only the very finest physicists and medical doctors work in that arena. It's not surgery, and it's not brain surgery or neurosciences. It's anesthesiology is where the action happens for the breakthroughs in science. And Jerry is professor emeritus, and yet he has to be very careful what he says. Whereas I don't report to anybody, and so I'm out there just saying what I say, and I don't care who makes judgment on me, because my past achievements stand as who I am. What I did in the past, there's my history. And when the School of Medicine takes his laboratory and cuts it down into a bunch of desks for other medical doctors, I have to question, why is that? And there is another example of medicine over anesthesiology running rampant on our educational systems and the support systems for research in what made America fine. You know, originally, we were never number one in our teaching of children. It only changed in graduate school because of toys. And we always excelled in graduate level research because we had the toys, the mass spectrometer, the da-da-da-da-da, that kind of thing. That has all changed, and we are no longer leading in any form of education in the world. Now, I have had enough, and I am embarrassed for science. I think it's a disgrace. I think medicine and dentistry are Exhibit A and B, and what they're doing, like School of Medicine to anesthesiology, is Exhibit C, and the list goes on and on. And Fukushima and what's going on with nuclear reactors right now, they're all leaking. They're contaminating our universe, and yet they still want to build more of them. Why? It's about money. Now, I'm going to say something about money for a moment, and the cryptocurrencies and where we're going with all of this virtual matrix. I've had enough. I think it's time I say something publicly about it. I'm doing it right now.
Okay, hold that thought. Hold that thought. We're going into a break. Dr. Richard Alan Miller's with us, richardalanmiller.com. Rick, you're talking about money and cryptocurrencies.
Well, yes and no. What I'm trying to tell you is you can't get here from there, or you can't get there from here, that kind of thing. We're going to have to start looking at new ways of approaching our problems, because quite obviously our current set of concepts with medicine, dentistry, and the rest of it, teaching our children, is not working. And the big question is, why is that? And there's only one conclusion I can come to. Not human. I think we have been invaded. I think they use facades like money to distract, and we have lost our way. And that the only way back is by going inside. Health is different than healing. If you're in health, there's nothing wrong with you. And health is quite different for each of us. Whereas healing implies illness. I remember when the American Indian had only 300 different diseases, and they had a cure for each one. And we have gotten so quantized, we now have broken it down to 30,000 known illnesses, and some have gotten so complex, we don't have cures yet for them. How does that work? And where's the advantage of health versus healing? In China, they used to pay the doctor when they didn't get sick. So you tell me where you want to go. And I think we've been invaded by something non-human. And when I say that, it's like your stomach. There's all kinds of different varmints down there, including what you might consider to be bad, like H. pylori. And yet, each one has a purpose and function in the whole scheme of things before they even start to turn on the heart, or love, or the brain, or imagination. And those two, love and imagination, are like religion and science. They're a closed system and limited only by the size of your heart and your imagination. And that's where I want to go, is where do we go from here? And that's why I'm saying that physics is now going to become magic with a mystery school. And there'll be different thoughts on that, just like we have religions today. There'll be the Bene Gesserit, the Mentat, the Space Guild, just like Frank Herbert proposed it. And they all have a purpose in the larger scheme of how the universe runs itself. And there's something else going on here, and we have missed the point of it. I don't think man is the center of anything. I think we were created to be slaves. And right now I feel like I'm David Copperfield with an empty bowl of mush asking, "Sir, please, may I have some more?" I want something more out of my life.
You know, Rick, you said that, I believe you said that we were created to be slaves. And I was thinking about that. And I was wondering if we were created as an experiment, just to see what we would do.
Well, what made us God's favored is we have choice.
Rick, when we come back, I've got a comment about the promise business. There are 3 businesses I can think of that are in the promise business. One is insurance, one is banking, another one is religion. And they're some of the biggest businesses in the country. And they're in the promise business. Not manufacturing, not tangible things. They're in the concept business as well. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares with Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Website, richardallenmiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R.com. Rick, at the end of the last hour, I mentioned 3 businesses, and I mentioned that they're in the promise business. And those businesses are insurance, banking, and religion. So if you look at insurance, and these are big businesses in this country. If you look at Springfield, Missouri, you'll see a church on every 3rd corner, literally. And the insurance business is one of a promise of indemnification. That means put you back where you were before the event happened. But really, we found out that if you're insured, just try to collect what you think that you should be collecting. And it's a fight. So that's a business of promises that are really many broken promises. Then if you look at banking, that is a system of, well, the insurance business, banking, and religion are concepts in my mind. Okay, and the banking business is one of, you have this belief that there's some value, but it's really a concept. Money is a concept right now. There is no tangible backing that I can see of any kind in banking that is commensurate with the value that we've placed on it. For example, a $1 note and a $5 note and a $20 note and a $100 note, they all cost about the same to produce. Maybe it's a little variation within the magnetic strip in the 100. But other than that, they're about the same value to produce, which is pennies compared to the value that we think they have. So that's a concept, and it's based on a promise of value, an implied promise. And then you have religion, and that's another series of promises. That, you do the right thing, and you show up for services as required. You may get into heaven,
or get 27 virgins, or
yeah. And if you don't, you're certainly going to go to a fiery, unpleasant place called hell. So we have three businesses, big businesses that are based on promises and beliefs and concepts in my mind. And please, I hope people don't think ill of me because I'm delineating this the way I really see it. I'm not saying I'm against religion. I'm just saying that it really is a bunch of promises by a bunch of humans, right, who are at the front of these businesses. And we call them priests and rabbis and pastors.
Yeah, they require a priest to talk to God on your behalf.
Right. And see, as a frugal person, I don't think I need to do that. I think I can talk to God myself. As a matter of fact, I know I can. So what I'm saying, Rick, is how do we get to the point where we have placed such enormous value on insurance, banking, and religion as compared with other things?
Yeah, the American dream. Well, for that, you must be first asleep.
Okay, so then with all of these, praise the Lord, Christians, how do we get to the point where we are so corrupt? How do we get to the point where we are not trustworthy? How did we get to the point where we will lie, cheat, steal, swap partners, be perverts? I mean, we have really, really lost our way.
That's what I said. The difference between ethics and morals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what our children need now. They need living examples of how to walk your talk.
But where are they going to...
Dysfunction, like pedophilia, gambling, spousal abuse, all of that is learned behavior.
Where are they going to find it? Rick, where are they going to find these examples?
The church was supposedly originally about.
Yes.
Moral codes of ethics, rules of conduct, where you band together for fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
So that you had a reinforcement of your specific beliefs and ideals. But the whole thing that went sideways when you started making judgment on another.
And making war.
Well, most wars have been fought over who's right regarding religion.
Well,
more people have been killed in the name of God than any other name.
Yeah, and I was on the phone with one of our instructors yesterday, and I mentioned that when someone says, "Hey, I'm a Christian," the first thing I do is hold on to my wallet. And I'm not making an exaggeration, because normally when you hear he's a Christian, he's a really good guy, he's a Christian, and the next thing is, you can buy your insurance from him, you can buy your parts from him, you can do business with him. When I hear he's a Christian in this neck of the woods, in Missouri, I hold on to my wallet. Because now I'm skeptical. Because if someone is religious, if someone has beliefs, and if someone has values that are above board and honest and have integrity, I don't need to hear that they're a Christian. I would be able to see it.
Well, that's
without
the idea of past deeds and history of performance.
Yeah.
And when you have a history that's laid out, I can't believe what's happening. I am going through my life right now. I had 18 file cabinets from all when I was a little boy, and I'm now sorting and, downsizing. And I am finding messages I wrote to myself at the time telling my future what to do. It's really interesting what's happening for me. I am becoming, what's the right word? A man on fire. I'm inflamed. It is as if I had been talking to myself all along, and I left myself notes on what to do next in the future. Now, is that predestiny? No, it's a closed system where I had dialogue with my inner self.
Rick, as I go through life lately, last few years, I've become more grumpy. And let me give you an example. I've had it.
You laugh, man. I love that part of you.
Well, I've become more grumpy. Let me give you an example. We were talking about medicine in hour number 1. I just want to give you an example of how I react. I mentioned that I fired this dentist. Before he even became my dentist, I fired him. Because I thought his ethics were skewed and not the way I liked them. So he got fired. And I give out his name, except the only reason I'm not giving out his name is I think that somebody might mistake what I'm saying to think, hey, I should go to him because Vinny mentioned his name. He's a good guy. No, I'm not doing that. But so my father, when he was alive, was on prescription medicine, which I think actually kind of helped him. He had Parkinson's. And dopamine was something that was able to help him. Well, I called in the refill to the Walmart pharmacy, local pharmacy, when we dealt with them. And I said, when will this be ready? And they said, 1 o'clock. It'll be ready at 1 o'clock. You can pick it up at 1 o'clock. So it's a 1-hour round trip. And I was taking care of my dad. He required 24/7 care. We took care of him here. Okay? It was end-of-life care. And so it was very stressful. Well, so I raced out to Walmart and to get the prescription. I was there at 1 o'clock. And I got in line. And I said, okay, it'll be ready in an hour. And I said, I called this in and it's supposed to be ready now. They said, it'll be ready in an hour. And I said, is that the best you can do? Because it was supposed to be ready now. And they said, yeah, it's the best we can do. I said, okay, all right. I'm just going to go over there. I see you've got a bench over there. I'll be on the bench. So what I did, Rick, was they have this metal bench right in the pharmacy, right next to the line. So if the line's long and you want to sit down, you can sit down on this bench. Well, I stretched out on this bench, and I was lying down on the bench. I figured I'm going to be there for an hour, so I might as well take a nap. Do you know? Do you know that they had my prescription ready, like right away? Because they did not like the idea.
Services now. We've talked about that earlier, and how the whole nature of services now are self-serving.
Yes. And so the point I'm trying to make is these are the kinds of reactions that I have. And this isn't what I used to be like. And I was a little more easy.
I'm sure your dad taught you well.
He did.
Oh, Vincent, you're so fun. Oh, man.
My dad did teach me to be polite. However, there was a divergence in what he taught me in my behavior lately. And it's because I see things crumbling. I see people falling down on their obligations. And it's not like they say, oh, I am so sorry.
There's no pride anymore in what you do.
Right. But they don't say, I'm so sorry because I know you drove an hour round trip to be here. I know it's important. Boy, we're going to put you at the front of the line because it's our fault. No, they don't do that. It's just like, hey, come back in an hour, bub.
Remember, you're no longer a human being.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. And I guess that is one of the salient points
That's because,
to take away.
Quote, there are too many people in the world, end quote. So there is an order, a standing order, to reduce the world population as part of the end game.
And it's working. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. And, last week, Rick, we talked about the Department of Defense initiating and carrying out a simulation of a grid down situation. The Amateur Radio Relay League sent out a post on the internet. We read that. And we're trying to figure out exactly how these guys could pull this off. We couldn't figure out how they could simulate an EMP with a grid down situation. We figured that they did it with the internet.
How they did it was with Comcast. And
right. Let's talk about that.
Here, it was supposedly a car drove into a pole, and we lost power here in Grants Pass, Oregon. But it was mostly, nationally, it was Comcast. Comcast had a failure. Isn't that interesting?
You're talking about the coincidence, right?
Oh,
Isn't
yeah,
that,
the coincidence of Comcast failing nationally across the board where, 1/4 of America was shut down like a grid-like situation.
Yes. Now, my understanding is that the issues were in Mountain View, California, Portland, Oregon, Denver, Colorado, Chicago, Illinois, Seattle, Washington, New York, San Francisco, California, Houston, Texas, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Boston. Yes. All big cities, the big ones.
In Grants Pass, Oregon, was right at midnight, 00, boom, boom, boom. Isn't that coincidentally interesting? Oh, and we honor vets.
Yeah, and I'm looking at some of the Comcast Cares responses, and it says some customers are having issues with their Xfinity service. We apologize and appreciate your patience while we work to fix. Next one. Our teams continue to monitor an external network issue. We apologize for the inconvenience and will provide updates as we learn more. Next one. Internet issues should now be resolved for almost all customers. We apologize for the inconvenience and thank you for your patience. Nowhere did I see, hey, listen, this is a government-sponsored test. We made a lot of money on it. Stock prices should go up a little bit, because we're cooperating, getting paid by the government. Or here's what really happened. There is no explanation of what really happened.
Why are
really
we no longer
and by the way,
Washington Post trying to report Watergate-type situations? What has happened to our media? Well, I
can tell you what's happened to our media.
Yeah.
I can tell you what's happened to our media. I talked to one of the owners years ago of, he used to own television stations in Springfield. He owns radio stations right now, multiple radio stations, big ones. And we were talking about the election. And he said, Republicans' money is just as good as Democrat money. And what he was saying is, I don't care who runs as long as they pay for their commercials. That's how I interpreted that. I also was counseled on things that I was saying that weren't too popular with the establishment, the government. They didn't like the things that I was saying, and they wanted me to knock it off. So there's no question to me it's all about money. And I was pressured to allow certain sponsors on my broadcast, USA Prepares, when I was on a local radio station in Springfield, Missouri. And I had problems with this one particular company, actually several companies' ethics. And I would not let them advertise on my broadcast because I didn't want our class to think that I approve of these advertisers. And so they really pressured me, and they would slip this guy's commercials in every once in a while. And finally, I lost my temper. And I said on the air, hey, just because you hear commercials on this broadcast doesn't mean I support, endorse, or condone what they do. Specifically, this one, I don't. Boom. That helped me retire from that radio station. Just saying that. So you can't mess with the money. You can't mess with money when it comes to radio. One thing you can't do is criticize sponsors. That is an absolutely unforgivable sin in radio. Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us. Rick, there's a statistic on the internet that I just looked up, and it's British Petroleum says that they've got a revised estimate of reserves of oil on the planet. And that estimate is that there's enough oil to last the world another 53.3 years at current production rates. 53.3 years. Now, when I think about that, I think, geez, I've got some cars that may last that long. I probably won't, but some of these vehicles may last that long. Well, we've got, I've got an old AMX, which is a 1968. I have two of those, so we've got some old vehicles here, antiques, and they with proper care and maintenance, and if we can keep the rubber parts from oxidizing and ozone from eating them, maybe we can get these to last another 40, 50 years. But the oil to power these guys, we're looking at 53.3 years. Renewable energy. What are your thoughts on renewable energy?
We have a lot of options, and why we continue to work with electricity and nuclear energy is beyond me. Our atmosphere screens most of the light from the sun, and just that energy alone is the whole concept of what a Dyson sphere was, Nibiru. With the I can go off into sci-fi if you'd like, because Stanford says, well, there's our binary. Wait, the infrared signature is wrong. And what does that mean? Well, a good friend of mine that just retired from JPL says, well, that most likely is something like a Dyson sphere surrounding the sun and the solar system to keep it as a closed system using all the energy. Now, Dyson was a scientist that invented this concept of a sphere of gold that would be surrounding the solar system as a bubble that captured all the energy from the sun. And basically, from what I'm now understanding Nibiru, and I did a talk last night on Kerry Cassidy about that, it may be that Nibiru is our future coming in to visit the moment. One of my friends, a guy named Gerald Gardner, is suggesting it might be the owners of Earth coming by to pick up the rent. There's all kinds of possibilities here of what we're talking about. What is energy? It's the ability to do work at a distance. That's the way we define energy. The ability to do work at a distance. And work as a definition having to do with force over a period of time. So we have several measurements that we're making, one of which is the concept of time as a measurement, a field of measurement, And now we're discovering that space and time are not exactly what we thought they were originally, and that time is a variable like gravitational force. There's a relationship here that we do not yet understand in the nature of what makes things work, and the scientists' absolute need for reproducibility and repeatability. They're different. To reproduce it and to repeat it. In other words, to have prediction of knowing that if I do this, that will happen. That's a type of security that only belongs to saints. Because, truthfully, time is not real any more than space, any more than information. They are concepts like cryptocurrency in your imagination as the way things work. And you have made an assumption that is not necessarily true, that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And when you make those kinds of assumptions, you set up the rules of engagement for what doors can be possible and what doors are not possible. And it's all structured in your imagination of what you define as assumed truths and definitions, the beginning of science. Now, it turns out that once you can step back and witness that aspect of physics, now you realize there's no difference between science and religion, except that science has become the leading religion of this world. And that's that, as I see it. Now, with that said, that means I can change the rules. And I'm going to now suggest that imagination is reality, and that all else follows form. Function following form. And I'm going to also suggest that you're only limited by your ability. The reticulans didn't exist until there was a movie around them. The concepts of Nephilim in the 1820s associated with spaceships and other races manufacturing us in 1820, when they discovered that skull, did not exist. Where did that come from? And what did that mean? Well, we had a whole bunch of other theories about that. And basically, why it's no longer in the Smithsonian is because the Smithsonian was formed around two brothers that were trying to vet and make credible their father, who was a Methodist minister, chasing Joseph Smith, trying to regain his Methodist ministry and flock on a individual that had a new religion based on a close encounter. Now, I'm going to tell you that we have a lot of different inconsistencies out there, one of which is in the media right now regarding Antarctica. Another is the Paris Accord, where the United States is the only country that has not joined that fallacy. I have lots of criticisms on Trump, but I'm going to say right up front, he's a nationalist and wants America to remain America, even though he probably right now is under house arrest, and that the United States government is in martial law, and the states around it have not yet realized that. We have a problem going on here in Guacamora, and I am a scientist, which means I don't get it. I do, but I don't get it, and has led me to believe we've been invaded by something non-human. And when I say non-human, I'm not even sure what I mean by that at any moment. And to look for life forms in the structure of water-bearing planets and sweet zones for human life as we understand it, there's life forms that are based not on carbon but on cyanide. And telluride. There's all kinds of possibilities that we have not even begun to notice in space around us. That's why Carl Sagan, in his movie Contact, tried to implicitly set the idea that aliens did not have to be from a space-time point of view. And that all of our SETI and other kinds of things that we do looking for things are extremely biased and limiting. And that is what actually, in fact, made us God's favored. We have choice. We have gone beyond the mold. Like David Copperfield, I want something more for myself. It's not about money. Where do we go from here?
Rick, you said you're talking about David Copperfield and wanting more. Well, it seems to me that too many people want more. Now, I'm not talking about, they want to be more inventive. They want to bless the planet more.
Oh,
they want more.
Yeah, greed is good.
Right. And
Yeah.
as a result of wanting more, we're destroying our planet.
Well,
and
that reminds me of the movie Little Shop of Horrors. Feed me, Mama, feed me. And short circuit, I crave input.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm thinking about something you said about the Earth's atmosphere, and there's this thought that what we could do is we could get the sun's energy and we can capture that outside of our Earth's atmosphere and then
There's
transmit
lots of things we could be doing that we're not.
Yep.
Oregon has developed a system of buoys that go up and down with the tide. Just that up and down movement, because of celestial planetary movement, generates power. And if you set that system up in Nova Scotia, at the north end of Nova Scotia, where all the farm units are, that tide swings 60 feet every day and is enough to power the entire eastern seaboard without any other form of energy, to include nuclear energy. And Indian Point leaking, Florida, and everything is leaking in nuclear energy. Why are we continuing to do that when it's dirty?
Rick, that's the only form of harnessing kinetic energy that I can think of. The only way of generating power that I can think of that is not harmful in a big way
There's
to the
another
planet.
way, and we'll talk about it at the other end of the commercial. A better way.
Sounds great. We'll be right back. Class, very quickly, I've got an update. At 4 o'clock today, Thursday, I'll be Dr. Bill Deagle's guest. We're going to be talking about preparedness and survival. So 4 o'clock today on GCN, I will be his guest. Metaphysics, Rick, you want to tell us about what you're offering?
Human power. Everybody's obese, approximately. How about you lock it off with your own energy, like a bicycle? That's the way Ernest Callenbach described it in Ecotopia. He lived next door to me when I was a small boy. I had the great fortune of learning about ecology and the use of humans and the way they would function best when they were using themselves as their source of energy. How's that sound?
I learned about some of those concepts at the university back in the 1971 through 1976. Actually 78 when I spent time at a couple different universities. But yeah, that's a really good point. But is it efficient when you consider the consumption of BTU input or food?
So there's a good place to do it. You could, for example, where your well is, instead of having a pump, which you pump by hand, you could have a little bicycle that you got on and you did a little treadmill, kind of pulling your water out of the ground with your own energy. And that alone gives you a whole different relationship to the water you pulled out of the ground and why it's important for your life.
Yeah, and you certainly wouldn't waste much of it if you had to ride that bike for 10 minutes to get 3 gallons of water. You
Which
certainly
is
wouldn't
enough
waste
to feed you for the day, and it only took you 10 minutes of your life and not 10% of your paycheck.
Interesting point. As we were talking about this, I was thinking of, harnessing energy. And we've got what, we used to call dinosaur-type powered energy, which would be power generation from natural gas and coal and oil, and all those dinosaur-powered energy production systems are dangerous to the environment. And then hydro, which is much, much safer until the dam breaks, right? And then wind is pretty safe, except for birds trying to fly through the propellers and the sound of these low frequencies that may be damaging to life forms. And then you've got nuclear, and that's just great, except for the failures of the nuclear vessels, and then there's no safe way of handling the radioactive substances. So the only really, really good large-scale production energy system that I can think of, and I think, you brought it up, of course, is harnessing of the tides. I mean, that is absolutely brilliant. They talked about that back in the 1960s, I believe, in Popular Science, Popular Mechanics,
well,
two
that
magazines.
Was the principle of Amsterdam and why people rode around on bicycles rather than automobiles.
Yeah. Well, I wish, by the way, that Popular Science and Popular Mechanics would return to the type of publications that they used to have. They were really inspirational to me. I could read them over and over again, and then find ways of doing things better in my life based on suggestions of other people. That was great. But Popular Mechanics, where did it go? I don't even know if it's around anymore.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
yep.
There's other forms of power sources. Hydrogen has a promise of way more in terms of using water and the hydrogen molecule inside water. And one of the other ones we have is all around the Earth, we have magma. We have the ability to harness that heat. The thing is, it's the conversion into the systems we're using. Now, a bicycle to pull out your drinking water makes absolute sense.
Yeah, and the problem with hydrogen is most of it is combined with oxygen, and it's in the form of water, so we've got to separate it, which takes energy. And if it
we have technology. The first automobiles did not run on petroleum; they ran on water, just like a horse did.
Rick, we're out of time. Richard Allen Miller. Hey, thanks so much.